Hi, you've clicked on to today's tropical tidbit for Saturday. Over here in the Atlantic, lots of activity going on. One can see from the satellite loop here that there's lots of stuff going on in this area of the world, the Southwest Atlantic Basin. And we've got an area of convection sitting here over the Southwest Caribbean that we've been watching. There's a tropical wave in here moving west, interacting with the monsoon trough. And we're going to continue to watch this as it moves west-northwestward. The models have backed off on solutions to this recently, mainly because they bring it far south. And as I've been saying, land interaction is going to be what keeps this down from significantly developing, though we are going to continue to watch it for further organization. There's a competing entity over here in the Eastern Pacific, and that's going to be one of the other problems for this, is that there's a secondary circulation on the other side of Central America that is starting to compete with it and has better vorticity than our Caribbean system. And notice how there's no convection in between them here on the continent, which is, of course, because there is less instability due to the land being cooler from the nighttime, and so we have an area of convection here and an area of convection here with empty clouds in between, which is kind of cool to see meteorologically. If we go over to the zoomed view here, you can see there's some curved cyclonic curvature to the convective bands here, but nothing too fancy. We've got mainly east-southeast trade winds coming out of this. You can see where the monsoon southwesterlies are coming into Central America here. And what's interesting, if we look over at the windsat, which is really not that great, especially for seeing through rainfall, you can kind of tell that it's seeing the monsoonal southwest flow weakly coming in here and then colliding with the east-southeast trade flow right in here. So we have a convergence boundary right in here, which is of course why we have all the clouds right in this area. Now, what we have to look for with these monsoonal things is if we look right here, the monsoonal trough is literally like this, and it moves right across into the Caribbean, and it's the tail end, the most northern end of the monsoon trough that generally gets the focus of convergence. The problem here is that we have land in the way. If this continent wasn't here right now, all the energy would be trying to go right into this area. The problem is that the land is in the way, so some of that air, not all of that air can rise in here because we have the land. So some of that air has got to rise in here, which is why we have the secondary circulation. If this continent wasn't here, we would get this to develop right in here without much competition from back here, because when you have these monsoon troughs, the development's going to be focused right at the end here where the monsoon southwesterlies are colliding with the trade winds. As it stands, there's enough convergence back here because of the land mass that we are getting a secondary circulation, which may or may not try to develop. I have a feeling it'll get drawn northward eventually into whatever's here as it comes west-northwest into the Yucatan Peninsula. Looking over here at the water vapor imagery, notice the shear zone to the east of the system getting shunted off to the east over here. Upper level ridging is starting to build over this area due to the release of latent heat. You can see there's an upper low over here northeast of Hispaniola, which is forcing net ridging over here. Really not too bad in terms of upper level winds, not too strong in here. Shear has dropped off substantially over the last 24 hours and has become fairly light over the region where we're watching this system. Again, the main negative factor here is probably going to be land interaction. Not a whole lot else is set fully against this system except for the land interaction, the overall broadness of the feature in general, which is typical of monsoonal systems. Now, if we look at the track of this thing, the models have trended much further south with it, and is the reason most of them don't develop it anymore. They have it coming inland here and kind of staying inland, not really getting over the Bay of Campeche. Some of the model runs keeping it over the continent over here, and I still believe this is a little bit too far south. You can see the area, the main area of convergence here. If we follow the trade wind lines, it's still going to make it across part of the Bay of Campeche if it follows the current low-level flow, and you can see this frontal boundary over the Gulf of Mexico, and guess what that means? That means there's still low to mid-level weakness over here over the Gulf of Mexico. I have a feeling this could gain a little bit more latitude and still make it across a portion of the Bay of Campeche. And as I said, I was saying yesterday that the most likely landfall location was the central Mexican coast around Tampico or so, depending on where the low center ended up forming. You can see the latest European actually brings it up towards Tampico. Very weak, not really a developed system at all, but it would be nice to have my forecast correct of the steering of this, and you can see it comes into the central Mexican coast in 4 days or so. The GFS is really interesting. This is day 6. What happens is it keeps it inland, but it festers this area around for quite a few days, and it just sort of sits here, and the area of convergence remains, and the monsoon low just festers, bringing lots of rain, possibly flooding to Central America. And then by day 6, what it does is it starts bringing it back, and if we go out 2 more days to day 8, look what happens. It starts bringing it north or north-northwest up towards Mexico and the Texas coastline. It eventually brings it up in here, and it's bringing rain to these folks, which is nice to see. But I don't know if I believe it, because if we go back to day 6 here, you can see here's the low. If we go up to 500 millibars for day 6, here's the ridge sitting directly to the north here, and it doesn't move. By day 8, it's still here. There still is trailing weakness to the northeast, but how are you supposed to get this to move north-northwest directly towards the center of the ridge? I really don't know how the model did that. I'm not sure how much I buy that solution given the upper level pattern that is shown. If the ridge moves west or east, then perhaps we could get something to get drawn further north up here. But if the ridge stays put over the plains, I don't really see this moving northward and getting a second chance to go in the Western Gulf. So we'll have to watch. In the long range, we will be watching the Caribbean again. Eventually things will fire up. This active pattern is not quite over yet. The first week of July could have some surprises. So we'll continue to watch this area. Overall, this has a very slight chance of developing into a tropical depression. Not that great of a chance given land interaction and the fact that it has competition from the eastern Pacific side, but this will be coming west-northwest. I think a little bit more north than some of the models are saying, more in line with what the latest European showed, but not a massive threat. The main threat here will be rainfall for Central America, especially if this sticks around for several days, and perhaps Mexico as well. And you never know, maybe a couple bands will get up in South Texas. We can always hope for that. Alright, that is it for today. Thanks for watching.